Last week, I was catching up with a former colleague, Sarah, and she's one of those people who just makes you feel slightly inadequate simply by existing.
I think you all know us, Sarah.
Absolutely. So we're sitting there, and she's checking her watch for a CrossFit class she has to get to, and then she's mentioning a Mandarin tutor she just hired.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then she pulls out her phone to show me this like incredibly complex spreadsheet for a side hustle she's running in interior design.
So she's got a lot going on.
A lot is an understatement. Her LinkedIn profile is basically a graveyard of certifications. I mean, coding, public speaking, project management, yoga instruction, it's all there.
The full, well-rounded portfolio.
Exactly. And she was practically vibrating with this pride of being well-rounded. She kept telling me that in today's economy, you have to be a Swiss Army knife or you're just obsolete.
A Swiss Army knife. That's the perfect metaphor for what we're told to be.
It is. And her face had this strained, almost manic glow. Like someone who's absolutely convinced they've finally mastered the art of doing it all.
But there's a but coming. I can feel it.
There's a big but. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from her lead developer about a critical bug in a project she was supposedly overseeing. And just like that, the mask slipped. The well-rounded Sarah, she didn't have a solution. She didn't actually know enough about the back end to even begin to help. And honestly, she was just too cognitively drained from her Mandarin prep to even process the logic of the problem.
She was spread too thin at the exact moment she needed depth.
Completely. She just sat there staring at the screen in this crowded cafe, and she whispered, "I'm doing everything, but I feel like I'm becoming nothing."
Wow. That's powerful.
That sudden collapse.
Yeah.
The instant shift from this superhuman facade to the hollow reality of dilution, it was jarring.
And that anecdote just perfectly frames the modern professional dilemma. This pressure to acquire layer upon layer of skill or certification often results in a career that is, well, it's wide, but dangerously shallow.
Lacking the depth you need for real impact.
Exactly. So today we are diving deep into that critical trade-off, the one between depth and breadth. Our mission is to really understand why this push to be a Swiss Army knife is so often a cognitive trap.
So we're going to unpack the science.
We are. We'll unpack the science behind task switching costs and mental depletion. And then we're going to pivot to some strategic models, both for you as an individual professional and for large organizations, that explain how to maximize your neural efficiency and build a career distinction that is, both unique and incredibly valuable.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're moving from that subjective feeling of being constantly drained and ineffective, which is exactly how Sarah looked, to the objective science behind it all.
Yes.
So this dilution, it isn't a failure of character. It's not that Sarah's lazy or unfocused. It's a cognitive trap, and it starts with something called context switching.
Precisely. The cognitive science behind these task switching costs it's absolutely crucial to understanding why generalized work can lead to such low quality output.
So what is context switching technically?
Well, it's defined as the process of interrupting a task, storing its mental state in your memory, completing some intermediate, often unrelated task, and then trying to retrieve that original state to resume your work.
It sounds like constantly hitting the save and quit button on a really complex program just to open another one for like 2 minutes and then trying to jump back into the first one.
That's a perfect analogy. And most of us, especially those who aspire to Sarah's do-it-all model, we treat this juggling act as a badge of honor.
Right. It's the unavoidable reality of managing multiple priorities. It's what a good employee does.
It is unavoidable in modern work, that's true, but the true cost is rarely accounted for, and it is staggering. Extensive research shows that engaging in frequent multitasking and context switching, which is the very definition of the Swiss Army knife professional's daily routine, can decrease your overall work productivity by up to 40%.
40%.
40%. And this loss isn't just wasted time, it's lost quality. The work you do produce is shallower, more error-prone.
That's massive. And I imagine the cost isn't just in the time you spend on the interruption itself. It's the time it takes to get back into the zone.
Exactly. The hidden element that really drives this cost is the recovery time. Sometimes it's called the re-entry cost.
Re-entry cost. I like that.
So when you're distracted from a cognitively demanding task, say by a buzzing notification or an interruption from a colleague, it takes significantly more than 20 minutes for your mental focus to fully recover and get back to peak efficiency on that original task.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's the psychological friction of just starting the engine again.
Yeah.
So if a typical office worker checks their email every 10 minutes,
they're in trouble.
They're constantly spending 2/3 of their hour just cycling up to speed. The productive work they think they're doing is actually being performed at a fraction of their real capacity.
And we can actually see the impact of this on the brain. Shifting your mental focus requires constantly adjusting your internal mental control settings. You have to change which information pathways are prioritized and which ones are suppressed.
It's like rerouting a switchboard every few minutes.
It is. And the cognitive load of that constant rapid adjustment affects your cognitive function to the same extent as experiencing one night of sleep deprivation.
Wow. So I'm basically working as if I haven't slept, just because I'm checking notifications.
That's what the data suggests. It dramatically increases the risk of errors, which is deadly when you are dealing with a critical bug, as Sarah was, and it causes this profound mental fatigue. And that fatigue, that's the root of the I'm doing everything, but I feel like I'm becoming nothing exhaustion.
It's that constant state of being tired, even when you haven't worked particularly long hours. But we need to define the nuance here, because there's a specific, sticky mechanism that makes the interruption even worse than the distraction itself. It's called attention residue.
This is where the work of management professor Sophie Leroy is so insightful. She explained the specific psychological cost of transitioning between these sequential tasks. When you switch from task A to task B, your attention doesn't immediately and cleanly follow.
It lingers.
A residue of your attention remains stuck on task A, and that residue slows down your cognitive processing capacity for task B.
That mental hangover. Still thinking about the previous task while you're trying to tackle the next one?
It's more insidious than just a hangover, and here's the absolutely crucial detail that makes the typical Swiss Army knife professional, the one dipping quickly into all these different projects, so profoundly inefficient.
Okay, what is it?
This residue is particularly thick and damaging if task A was unresolved or unbounded before the switch.
Unresolved. So if Sarah glances at that critical bug message, she realizes it's a big problem, but then she decides to quickly switch back to her Mandarin flashcards without actually dealing with the bug.
That is the worst case scenario for performance. That unresolved tension, the critical nature of the bug, the knowledge that it's demanding her attention, it just sits in her working memory.
So part of her brain is still running a background process on the bug problem.
Exactly. It's mentally wrestling with that complex, stressful problem she chose not to solve yet, even though she is now actively trying to focus on, say, tonal inflections in Mandarin. That residual focus dramatically dampens her performance on the new task.
And worse, I'd imagine it keeps her from fully engaging with the bug problem when she finally returns to it later. It probably increases the chance of errors there, too.
It does. It's this constant state of partial engagement that defines modern multitasking. You're never fully present on the new task because you're psychologically burdened by the last one. And this feeds directly into the next major concept about why this generalized focus is so profoundly draining.
Which is?
The limited resource model, which is better known as ego depletion.
Ego depletion. I've heard this term. It's not about being arrogant. Right.
No, not at all. The term was coined by social psychologist Roy Baumeister, and he uses the term ego in the psychoanalytic sense. He's referring to the self's executive function, the part of you responsible for conscious choice and control. The core idea, the limited resource model, is that your self-control, your willpower, it draws on a conscious mental resource that is finite. It can be taxed to exhaustion when it's in constant, varied use without any reprieve.
So the energy we use to manage ourselves, to resist temptation, to make hard decisions, to stick to a difficult task, it's all drawn from the same bucket.
Exactly. The muscle model analogy is often used here. Initial acts of self-control, what they call the depleting task, cause a measurable decrease in strength for subsequent, often totally unrelated, self-control tasks.
Like lifting weights. If you exhaust your biceps, you can't go do a bunch of pull-ups right after.
Precisely. And Baumeister's key 1998 experiment provided the foundational evidence for this. Subjects were brought into a lab where fresh-baked cookies and chocolates were temptingly placed next to bowls of plain radishes.
That is just mean. A setup designed for maximum internal conflict.
Indeed. One group was asked to resist the tempting sweets and instead eat only the bland radishes. So this group had to expend mental resources for self-control.
And the other group?
The control group was simply allowed to eat the chocolates. No willpower required. Afterwards, both groups were given a difficult, frustrating, and unrelated puzzle task that was intentionally designed to be unsolvable.
And the hypothesis was that the people who had to resist the cookies, the radish eaters, would give up on the puzzle faster.
They did, by a lot. Those who had to resist the chocolate subsequently showed significantly less persistence on that frustrating puzzle task than the groups who hadn't exerted prior self-control over food.
How much less?
They spent less than half the time trying to solve the puzzle before giving up. It's a clear indication that their finite mental energy, their willpower, had been depleted by that initial act of resisting temptation.
This is so critical because it demonstrates that the resource isn't context-specific. It's not a food willpower battery.
Exactly. It doesn't matter if you use willpower on food or on a difficult negotiation or on forcing yourself to study a foreign language. The resource depletion affects all subsequent high-effort tasks.
The research confirmed this broad application, right?
Yes. They found that subjects who chose to write a speech that included beliefs contrary to their own, which is a high self-controlled task requiring conscious suppression of your own internal beliefs, were also less able to persist on the frustrating puzzle. The very act of choice, self-regulation, or counter-attitudinal behavior, it all draws upon that same limited resource pool.
This perfectly explains that hollow feeling Sarah described. She's not just switching tasks, she's cycling through a half-dozen demanding identities that require constant self-enforcement.
She's depleting her ego minute by minute.
Right. She uses resources to learn Mandarin vocabulary, then more resources to push herself through the discomfort of CrossFit, then even more to analyze her interior design spreadsheet. Every time she enforces a different discipline or identity, she's draining that core reserve.
Which leaves her depleted when she actually needs to apply complex, sustained focus to her real job, like solving that critical bug.
So ego depletion manifests in all these undesirable behaviors because it just fundamentally hinders our ability to self-regulate.
It does. I mean, consider the real-world implications far beyond the lab. Chronic dieters, for example. They expend resources constantly resisting cravings throughout the day. This chronic expenditure makes them significantly more susceptible to overeating or just giving up their diet entirely when faced with another temptation later in the day, especially when they're fatigued.
It's that moment you get home from a stressful day of enforcing good behavior in the office, your cognitive resources are shot, and that's when the self-regulation failure happens. The fridge and the couch win. Every time.
And this plays out massively in complex consumer behavior, too. When consumers are faced with complex decisions like comparing 30 different insurance policies or reading all that fine print, that sustained complexity results in significant ego depletion.
And then what happens?
Well, once depleted, they're far more likely to become passive, just giving up on careful comparison and settling for the default option. Or, conversely, they make impulsive decisions that don't align with their true financial values. The cognitive cost of that prolonged decision-making makes the consumer vulnerable to poor choices.
So the pursuit of being excellent at everything is fundamentally a strategy for maximizing inefficiency, accelerating mental fatigue, and increasing the probability of making impulsive errors.
That's a perfect summary. If context switching decreases your output by 40% and ego depletion saps your core discipline for persistence, then the only logical antidote is a radical approach to maximizing your neural efficiency.
The traditional goal of well-roundedness is a recipe for cognitive bankruptcy. So we have to transition from the problem of dilution to the solution of intensity.
Exactly. Which brings us to the deep work antidote. After realizing the tremendous cognitive cost of fragmentation, the only way forward is consolidation.
Okay, deep work. This is a term from Cal Newport, the computer science professor.
That's right. He defined deep work as a state of profound mental focus on a single, cognitively demanding task, completely free from distraction. It is the core, systematic strategy for producing output that is both high in quantity and supreme in quality.
And he has a formula for this, right?
He does. He encapsulates the idea with the fundamental law of productivity. High-quality work produced is equal to the product of time spent and the intensity of focus.
Output equals time times intensity. Okay, so if we assume most people have roughly the same amount of time available, 8 hours a day, then the only way to exponentially increase your high-quality output compared to your peers is to crank up that intensity dial to the maximum setting.
Which means systematically minimizing the distractions, the interruptions, and the context switching that we just discussed in detail. The deep work approach is the systematic way to minimize the performance dampening effects of attention residue and ego depletion. It allows you to produce radically superior results per unit of time you spend working.
And the real-world difference this makes must be profound.
Oh, it is. We see it in people like Adam Grant, the management professor at Wharton.
Right, the youngest full professor there. He's known for being incredibly prolific, which always seemed counterintuitive to me given the heavy demands of an elite academic role.
His productivity rate is absurdly high for his field. In a period of just 2 years, he was publishing 7 articles in major peer-reviewed journals, while simultaneously writing a best-selling book and maintaining a full teaching load.
How is that even possible?
He didn't see productivity as a constant struggle. He approached it as a scientific problem to be systematically solved using efficiency models. And his key strategy was the systematic consolidation of intellectual work into long, uninterrupted stretches. He uses a batching strategy.
Batching. So how did he operationalize that to achieve such intense focus? I mean, it's easy to say just focus, but Grant made it a structural mandate.
He batches on multiple levels. So on the macro scale, he executes a form of radical professional specialization. He stacks nearly all of his teaching, his committee work, and his student responsibilities into the fall semester.
The entire fall.
Yes, and this strategy ensures that the entire spring and summer semesters are dedicated solely to deep research and writing. By minimizing distractions from one core domain like teaching and admin during another core domain research, he can operate with immense sustained focus. He prevents that attention residue from his teaching duties from ever interfering with his research flow.
That is the bimodal philosophy on a massive scale.
Yeah.
He's setting aside entire defined seasons for deep focus. That must require incredible organizational discipline and serious self-control to manage that cyclical workload.
It does. And he applies this batching strategy on an even smaller micro scale. Within his research periods, he'll isolate himself for 3 or 4 days at a time to focus completely on discrete, complex tasks for a single paper.
Like what?
Things like running the final data analysis or writing a full draft from beginning to end or executing a really heavy-duty edit. And crucially, during these isolation periods, he often puts an out-of-office autoresponder on his email.
Wait, so if he's physically in his office, his email still says he's out of office. That sounds like asking for trouble in a hyper-connected workplace.
To Grant, enforcing strict, unambiguous isolation is paramount until that cognitively demanding task is completed. His colleagues might be confused, seeing him there, but he enforces this rule because he fundamentally understands the devastating performance hit caused by the residue slathering interruption of a quick email check.
He's minimizing the cognitive costs we just defined by creating an external social barrier to distraction.
He is. It's the perfect modern counterintuitive move. Most people feel obligated to be immediately responsive. The Swiss Army knife professional believes they have to be always on to prove their value. But Grant is proving his value by intentionally becoming unreachable for short, intense bursts of deep work that maximizes impact.
And this isn't a new discovery. You mentioned there's a strong historical precedent for this kind of radical isolation.
Absolutely. Think of Bill Gates in the early days of Microsoft. Back in the 1980s, he routinely scheduled what he called think weeks.
Right, the famous think weeks.
He would isolate himself completely in a secluded cabin for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. His entire schedule was dedicated solely to reading papers submitted by employees pitching new ideas and just strategic thinking. This radical enforced isolation maximized his creative and strategic potential, and it allowed him to stay decades ahead of the competitive innovation curve.
So deep work isn't just one tactic. It's a whole set of philosophies for incorporating intensity into your career. You mentioned the bimodal philosophy that Grant and Gates used, but what are the other ways professionals can integrate deep work into different life structures?
Newport outlines 4 primary philosophies for structuring deep focus, and you choose one based on the nature of your work and your life constraints. First, there's the rhythmic philosophy, which is probably the most accessible for many workers.
Okay, what does that look like?
This involves blocking out specific 1 to 4 hour chunks at the exact same time every single day to complete your most challenging work. The key is turning deep work into a non-negotiable, predictable routine. You're essentially building a habit of intensity.
Building a ritual of focus, like a daily workout schedule for your brain. I like that.
Exactly. Then there's the bimodal philosophy, which we've seen with Grant and Gates. Setting aside large segregated periods, at least 1 entire day per week, or even an entire season dedicated purely to deep work, completely segregated from the shallow, reactive tasks of administration and communication.
That sounds necessary for anyone whose output is measured in massive, singular creative efforts, like writing a book or solving a huge engineering problem.
Absolutely. The third philosophy is the monastic philosophy. This is the most extreme approach.
Monastic, as in like a monk.
Precisely. It involves the wholesale elimination or radical reduction of all shallow work, administration, and external distractions altogether. It's typically best suited for roles like creative artists, high-level scientists, or academics whose value is almost entirely predicated on creative, original output. They often literally disconnect from technology and external demands for months at a time.
I think the monastic philosophy would cause my team to stage an intervention on me, but I can certainly see the appeal of the Bill Gates think cabin isolation. What's the final approach? It's probably the most challenging.
It is. It's the journalistic philosophy. This is for high-discipline professionals who have to fit deep work around a really unpredictable schedule like journalists, executives, or consultants. They possess the rare mental capacity to switch instantly into intense focus whenever a window appears early morning, late evening, or between meetings. It requires immense discipline to conquer those attention residue and context-switching costs instantly.
It sounds like, regardless of which philosophy you choose, the universal goal is to treat your focus like a skill and muscle you have to actively train, not just a state you hope to stumble into.
That is the crucial realization. You have to actively train your ability to sustain focus, which often means embracing boredom. If your brain is constantly used to quick, fragmented stimuli, checking Twitter, answering texts, reading headlines, it literally loses the capacity for sustained, deep thought. Mental focus is like a muscle. The more you train it through focused effort, the stronger it becomes and the lower your switching costs become.
So this shifts the problem from time management to attention management.
Yeah.
We're trying to maximize the value produced by our brains by minimizing the mental cost of distraction.
And the economic cost of failing to do this is just enormous. The average office worker, as we know, spends about 70 days per year completing repetitive, shallow tasks like looking up information or replying to emails. That costs nearly $5 trillion in lost productivity across the U.S. economy. To reclaim that time and quality, you have to minimize distractions through practical techniques. Turn off all your notifications, use app blockers, and create time blocks for shallow work like email only between, say, 9 and 9:30 in the morning and 4 to 4:30 in the afternoon, instead of letting it interrupt your deep thought all day long.
So we've learned why generalized multitasking efforts drain the individual professional. It creates a cognitively depleted Sarah. But this same fundamental tension between generalization and specialization, it plays out at the level of the organization, right?
It does.
So if a large company needs to execute flawlessly, does it hire a team of Sarahs who can coordinate well but lack depth? Or does it hire a team of hyper-focused specialists?
This is where we transition from individual cognitive science to large-scale organizational economic strategy. Organizations face the exact same trade-off, but they quantify it differently. We need to distinguish between two crucial organizational elements that are constantly in tension: adaptation and coordination.
Okay, define those for me in a corporate context.
Adaptation is the organization's ability to align its actions with rapidly changing external market conditions. So shifts in consumer demand, the emergence of a new technology, price volatility, and supply chains.
So looking outward, reacting to the world.
Exactly. And coordination is the seamless integration of internal efforts. It means employees performing complementary cooperative actions to ensure that the marketing team knows precisely what the engineering team is building and that the budget aligns with both. Coordination is the organizational glue.
And the optimal organizational decision, who to hire, how to train it, rests entirely on where the balance of power lies between these two competing needs. Which one is the organization willing to risk failing?
Precisely. The specialist-generalist trade-off is modeled based on which type of worker best serves adaptation versus coordination. The specialist, with their deep, concentrated expertise in a specific niche, excels in adaptation.
Because they know their little corner of the world inside and out.
Right. They have a higher probability of observing critical local market information because they know their niche so intimately and can quickly understand subtle changes. However, they face challenges in coordination due to their limited cross-area knowledge.
So they might optimize their local niche perfectly, but they don't know the language or the priorities of the finance department, and that leads to miscommunication.
Exactly. Conversely, the generalist, who's been developed through broad multitask or job rotation experience, excels in coordination. Their wide range of knowledge allows them to coordinate almost flawlessly with counterparts across departments. They can speak the language of engineering, marketing, and sales.
But they struggle with adaptation. They have less depth, and therefore a lower probability of observing those critical local market signals or recognizing complex shifts in their specific domain.
That's the trade-off. So if a failure in market awareness is the cost the organization wants to minimize, they stack specialists. If a failure in internal communication or synergy, the coordination failure, is the cost they want to minimize, they stack generalists.
And that understanding leads to the core theoretical prediction here, right? Something about a monotonic shift.
Yes, the monotonic shift in optimal composition. Proposition 1 states that the greater the relative importance of coordination compared to adaptation, the optimal organizational composition shifts monotonically from specialists toward generalists.
Let me break that down. So if internal screw-ups are more costly than missing an external opportunity,
then you need more generalists. If coordination failures severely damage organizational profit, say a marketing campaign launches promoting a product that doesn't actually exist yet, the firm minimizes these losses by assigning more generalists who can coordinate perfectly.
Generalists are organizational shock absorbers. They prevent catastrophic internal failure, even if they aren't achieving hyper-optimized performance in any one silo. But what happens when the market itself gets turbulent, when external uncertainty skyrockets?
That is Proposition 2. And it adds a critical layer of nuance that often confuses management. If coordination is already sufficiently important, meaning the importance of internal alignment meets a high threshold, then increased market uncertainty also shifts the optimal organization further toward generalists.
Okay, that's counterintuitive. Under high market uncertainty, wouldn't you want specialists who are best equipped to quickly adapt to local changes? I mean, that's what adaptation is all about.
It seems logical, but you have to account for the amplified risk. High uncertainty means that even if a specialist observes and adapts perfectly to their local market information, say a sudden dip in the price of a component they manage, if the other departments like finance, manufacturing, logistics fail to coordinate with that sudden adaptation, the cost of that coordination failure is massive and immediate.
Ah, I see. So the organization makes a tactical bet. Under high market stress, the risk of internal misalignment is actually greater than the risk of just being a little slower to adapt externally.
Precisely. Generalists mitigate catastrophic coordination losses better under high uncertainty. When coordination is critical, increased uncertainty simply amplifies the benefits of organizational alignment, making the generalist's broad coordination skills the greater priority for minimizing total organizational costs. Even if it means sacrificing some degree of local optimal performance, it's a risk management decision.
This organizational theory feels like it must be testable in the real world. You mentioned the data from J-Trading, a massive Japanese trading company, which illustrates this exact dichotomy.
Yes, J-Trading is divided into business types with profoundly different management priorities. We can analyze the real-world application of the model just by looking at their internal structure.
So what are those two organizational archetypes within J-Trading?
First, you have the business investment, or BI, areas. These include infrastructure, energy, and consumer business. These areas are fundamentally coordination critical because they focus on long-term, project-based investment.
Like building a power plant or launching a joint venture.
Exactly. Managers in these areas emphasize frequent meetings, communication, and intensive information sharing to ensure all the moving parts of a multi-year project align. For them, coordination failure is fatal.
That sounds like a textbook example of an organization prioritizing alignment and synergy over hyper-specific market speed. And the other type?
The second type are the commodity trading, or CT, areas. These include machinery, chemicals, and metals. These are adaptation critical, focusing on rapid, high-volume product trading, where rapid adjustment to global market prices and supply conditions is absolutely essential. Managers in these areas prioritize deep product knowledge, advanced technology, and rapid market adjustment. For them, adaptation failure or losing a split-second advantage on price is fatal.
So based on the theory, we would predict that the adaptation-critical CT areas should have more specialists, and the coordination-critical BI areas should have more generalists. How did the data actually measure specialization?
We use something called Career HHI, the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index.
HHI, that's usually an economic measure of market concentration, right?
It is, but here it's used to measure career topic concentration. A higher career HHI means an employee has spent a greater proportion of their career concentrated in a single specialized domain.
So basically, it measures how much of your job history is concentrated in one specific field. The higher the number, the deeper the specialist you are.
That's the perfect conversational translation. And the empirical findings strongly support the theory. The CT divisions, machinery, chemicals, metals, which have that higher adaptation need, showed a significantly higher degree of specialization, a higher career HHI compared to the BI divisions.
And the BI divisions?
Well, the infrastructure division, for example, which is a prime BI area, had a significantly lower HHI. This confirms its coordination critical nature and its reliance on generalists to keep everything aligned.
Okay, that makes the structure clear. But Proposition 2 was about market uncertainty. How did that factor in within those coordination critical areas?
We measured market uncertainty using market beta, which indicates how sensitive a stock or a business area is to overall market movements. We predicted that within the BI divisions, where coordination is essential, greater market uncertainty would push the organization even further toward generalists to lock down that internal alignment when the outside world is chaos.
And the data confirms this choice to prioritize coordination in the face of turbulence.
It does. The proportion of generalists in the business investment divisions was positively correlated with market uncertainty. When the market beta was high in those BI areas, specialization dropped significantly.
So it confirms that generalists, despite the higher training costs associated with job rotation, are the optimal resource allocation in unstable, coordination-heavy environments.
They are. They're the only ones who can effectively minimize catastrophic coordination losses when external market information is constantly changing.
This just shows that the pursuit of expertise is a high-stakes, highly intentional game, whether you're looking at the organizational level or the individual level. The Swiss Army knife analogy fails because it completely neglects the severe cognitive costs of dilution and the specific organizational costs of misalignment.
Exactly.
So what is the ultimate strategic solution for the individual? For the person who wants to create long-term competitive advantage without succumbing to the burnout of diluted focus like Sarah?
The path to distinction moves beyond simple passive versatility and toward a strategy we call strategic skill stacking. The goal is to become the professional who is uniquely positioned in the market, not just generally competent or widely available. This is about being indispensable.
Okay, how does this differ from the kind of indiscriminate skill collection we saw in Sarah? You know, the CrossFit, Mandarin, coding certificates, that sounds like a stack.
Sarah's approach was additive. She was hoping that 1 + 1 + 1 equaled 3. Strategic skill stacking is the strategic acquisition and combination of multiple complementary skills that, together, create a unique professional profile.
So the skills have to work together.
Yes. The core premise is that the value of these combined skills doesn't merely add up, it multiplies. It creates a competitive advantage that is difficult to copy, to automate, or to outsource.
Multiplication, not addition. That's the essential difference between draining yourself and leveraging yourself.
It is the ultimate difference. This concept was popularized by cartoonist and strategist Scott Adams, who suggested the path to professional distinction isn't being in the top 1% of just one skill. That field is hyper-competitive, demanding monastic-level focus.
So what's the alternative?
Instead, being in the top 25% of several highly complementary skills is often vastly more valuable. Because at the intersection of those 2 or 3 disciplines, the competition just drastically decreases.
So you create rare air. Professional territory, where your specific combination of abilities makes you virtually irreplaceable, because there simply isn't anyone else with that exact profile.
And that makes profound economic sense. If 100,000 people in the world are excellent at programming, you face fierce competition. But if only 50 people are excellent programmers who also possess deep industry context in renewable energy and are highly skilled negotiators who speak fluent Mandarin, you've effectively engineered your own non-competitive niche. You own that space.
This also leverages psychological synergies. You're developing what's called cognitive versatility.
Right. The ability to shift seamlessly between analytical reasoning like coding and data and social reasoning like negotiation and strategy, depending on the situation.
And you're also leveraging transfer learning.
Exactly. The ability to recognize patterns and apply knowledge from one domain to solve problems in another. A person who understands the underlying structure of music theory might see patterns in coding architecture that a single discipline engineer completely misses. That cross-pollination of ideas is the source of true high-leverage innovation.
So what does this ideal leverage-generating professional look like in terms of their skill shape? We always hear about the T-shaped professional.
The T-shaped professional is the foundational model for strategic stacking. Imagine the letter T. The vertical bar represents your depth of expertise in a single field. That's your specialization, the product of the deep work we discussed earlier. This is your core functional capability.
And the horizontal bar?
The horizontal bar represents the ability to collaborate across disciplines and apply your core knowledge outside your immediate field. This means you have that deep expertise, but you also speak the language of engineering, marketing, finance, and product enough to integrate and coordinate effectively. This person is essentially a specialist who is also an effective generalist for coordination purposes.
So it mitigates the coordination weakness of the pure specialist while maintaining their adaptation strength.
Precisely. And there are even more sophisticated shapes that maximize leverage. The pie-shaped professional, modeled on the Greek letter pi, is defined by having a broad mastery of general management or coordinating skills atop a few spikes of deep functional expertise.
A few spikes, so not just one.
Right. This person doesn't just have one deep specialization, they have two or three.
So T-shaped means one deep spike and broad coordination ability. Pie-shaped means multiple deep spikes and broad management integration. These individuals are the definition of the versatile specialist of the future.
Career research consistently confirms this trend. The most valuable roles are increasingly held by these versatile specialists, individuals who maintain that deep expertise in one core domain while intentionally expanding into adjacent complementary areas. This strategic positioning creates profound resilience and future-proofing.
Resilience against what, specifically?
Primarily against automation. Roles that require diverse skill combinations, especially those that mix technical ability with human judgment and coordination, are significantly less vulnerable to automation.
Why is that?
Machines can excel at specialized, repetitive tasks, but they struggle profoundly with contextual judgment and the integration of knowledge across different domains to solve novel problems. The high-value work is the work of connection and synthesis, which stacked professionals excel at.
Can you give us some concrete high-value stacks that are currently commanding premium compensation in 2025 because of this multiplication effect?
Absolutely. We see several distinct and high-value combinations emerging today. One of the strongest is technical expertise paired directly with business acumen. This manifests in roles like technical product managers, who can code and deeply understand user needs, but can also articulate the ROI to the executive suite.
They bridge the gap between creation and commercialization, and that eliminates the coordination lag we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Another critical stack is data analysis capabilities combined with visualization and storytelling skills. It is no longer enough to just run a complex machine learning model. The high leverage skill is the ability to communicate the narrative, the context, and the implication of that model's results to non-technical decision makers.
So the stack turns data from raw numbers into actionable strategy.
It does. And what about the impact of generative AI?
Yeah, how does that play in?
Critically, in the age of generative AI, the highest value stack is AI application combined with deep, specific industry context. The person who knows how to prompt, train, and apply AI tools is valuable, but only if they have the contextual knowledge of their industry, say healthcare regulatory practices or logistics supply chains, to make the application meaningful and safe. That combination of niche knowledge and advanced tooling is an unbeatable stack.
So the core takeaway here is that the goal is not just stacking random skills like a hoarder, but building a stack where the skills actively multiply each other's worth. You want to create a total value that is greater than the sum of its parts. And that requires immense intentionality, starting with your core, deep expertise.
Absolutely. This transition is not about resume building. It's about strategic advantage building. You start with your core capability, your single deep vertical spike, and you ask specific strategic questions. What skill, if I added it, would make me twice as valuable to my clients? What knowledge would allow me to own more of the entire process or outcome, thereby creating leverage? The professional landscape is no longer rewarding the passively well-rounded. It's rewarding those who have architected a unique value narrative. The goal is to build a career where you minimize the cognitive drain of context switching and maximize the leverage created by your intentionally stacked unique abilities.